In the first video on the worst wedding nights in history, we were able to see shocking and impacting accounts, such as that of Queen Maria Josepha, unacceptable cases today. However, due to the many arranged marriages of that time, there were other horrible nuptials. And since it was much requested and commented on, we decided to make a part 2 of the worst wedding nights in history. If you missed part 1, I'll add a card above. The first wedding night on this list is that of King Henry VIII, always him, with his fourth wife, Anne of Cleves. Henry VIII was single for over 2 years after the death of his third consort, Jane Seymour, in 1537. The search for a new queen began in 1538. With the new marriage, Henry intended to find a source of distraction and excitement. His wife would be responsible for entertaining him to the point that he would feel like behaving like a gentleman. The king ordered his ambassadors to find the ideal wife. At the time, the King of England did not have a very good reputation as a husband. As a result of alliances, the chosen one was Anne of Cleves, sister of the Duke of Cleves, Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. On December the 11th, 1539, the young woman arrived at the port of Calais. She was about to be married without ever having seen her fiancé. The first meeting was not pleasant for both, and Henry VIII made it clear that he had not liked the suitor, that she was very different from the painting that had been sent to him. The marriage took place on January the 6th, 1540. She was only 23 years old, the king being 25 years older than her. Before the ceremony, the king tried every way to get rid of his bride, but he couldn't. Not surprisingly, the wedding night was unpleasant. The meeting of the two was a huge failure from the king's point of view as he went limp. They kept trying night after night, but the king's instrument wouldn't work, and Anne remained as much of a maiden as she was born, for the king would not insert anything into her. Henry blamed the sagging breasts as the cause of his lack of pleasure. We must remember that the problem was not Anne of Cleves, much less her breasts, but Henry's need to get rid of her without taking any blame, and of course, without revealing his impotence. In the end, Henry made a deal with Anne, and the marriage was annulled. Anne lived very well after the annulment, outliving Henry VIII. The marriage of Henry VI and Margaret of Valois was destined to fail. He was a Protestant, and she was a Catholic princess, in a period when France was split between these two religious currents. Margaret of Valois was Princess of France, the daughter of Catherine de' Medici and Henry II. She married King Henry of Navarre on August 18, 1572. This happened during the foggiest days of the Reformation, when there were religious wars. Many people on both sides were strongly against this marriage. At the time, dynastic marriages were a consequence of peace negotiations and arrangements between allies. However, this marriage was used by Catherine de' Medici to expel Protestants from French soil. On the night of August 23rd to 24th, 1572, many Catholics were sent to wreak havoc on the Protestants still in the area due to the public ceremony. When the operation was over, about 3,000 people were murdered. Today, this is known as one of the worst massacres in French history, known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. The events of St. Bartholomew's Night occurred days after the wedding night, but it was believed that the consummation had not occurred and that the marriage could be annulled. However, to avoid her husband's death, Margaret told her mother that the consummation was done. After the honeymoon was interrupted by the massacre, the couple met only a few times. Henry became a prisoner, and Margaret was a political pawn. Later, Henry managed to break free and made his way to Navarre. The couple never had a full union. They lived in disagreement. He cheated on her, and she cheated on him. The years passed, and no heirs were begotten until the marriage was annulled. Isabella II of Spain, she ascended the Spanish throne in 1833, when she was still a child. Her reign was controversial, full of coups and extramarital affairs. From early on, the court was concerned with finding her a suitor, but the queen always put up some obstacle. In the end, the chosen one was Duke of Cadiz, Francisco de Assis of Bourbon, cousin of the queen. He was a man who avoided meddling in politics. Moreover, this union satisfied all the Spanish political parties. But still, this made the queen insecure. When she learned that Francis could not be her future husband, she began to cry and plead with her mother. She even said, "No, not with Paquita." Francisco de Assis was a very effeminate man. He was suspected of being homosexual. For this reason, he was known at the Spanish court as Paquita. The marriage between the two was celebrated on October 10, 1846. She was 16 years old at the time of the wedding and Francis was 24. It is said that the day before the wedding celebration, Isabella II said to her mother Maria Cristina, "It's something asked from me as a queen, but not as a woman. I did not want this man to be my husband. They imposed him on me, and I do not want him." As we can imagine, the wedding night was an absolute disaster. She even told her closest friends, "What could I expect from a man who wore more lace on his wedding night than I did?" At first, the couple hated each other, but gradually they managed to establish a friendly relationship. Over the years, the husband became an advisor and friend to Isabella II of Spain. The friendship was strong, and the couple would get together to talk about their lovers. On one side was a nymphomaniac queen, and on the other was a homosexual king. Louis XIII of France and the Spanish Infanta Anne of Austria had an unhappy marriage, full of accusations and distrust. The marriage took place on November 21, 1615. Both were only 15 years old. The marriage was arranged by Maria de Medici, Queen Mother of France and regent of Louis XIII. Maria de Medici's regency was disastrous for France. Her relationship with her son was horrible, always putting her son aside and seeking to take all the power that was due to him. To attempt a rapprochement with Spain, she arranged for her children to marry those of the Spanish king. Anne of Austria was destined for Louis XIII. The Spanish princess, daughter of King Philip III of Spain, was another humiliation for Louis XIII, for he saw in Anne a simple Spaniard, and consequently an enemy. But at that time, Louis was not in charge and the marriage took place. Louis, at 15, did not seem ready to take on that responsibility. The sovereign was frail, immature, very shy, and still in puberty. The wedding night only took place because his mother forced him to. He was taken by Maria de Medici and pushed into the marriage bed. 2 hours later, Louis returned to his room and showed his reddened glands to his personal physician, saying that he had performed the act twice. It is hard to say whether he lied or failed, but nothing happened that night, and they did not sleep together again until 4 years later. Last on this list, we highlight the terrible wedding night of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. Marie Antoinette was the daughter of Maria Theresa of Austria, as the future Louis XVI was the Dauphin of France and grandson of Louis V. The marriage of the two was a political arrangement between the dynastic houses of France and Austria, longtime enemies. But in this period, there was a rapprochement, and the marriage of the princes was a sign of this. For the marriage to take place, Marie Antoinette was re-educated in her manners and aesthetics. She had to adapt her standards of beauty and her upbringing to French ways. Louis was a shy and reserved young man who thought only of hunting and working with watches. His father wanted his bride to be as beautiful as possible, arousing a desire for woman that his grandson did not show he had. The wedding took place in April 1770 in a Viennese church, and it clearly looked like a political arrangement, as it was done by proxy. At the altar, Maximilian, the bride's brother, played the role of the Dauphin. After the ceremony, a procession of 57 carriages headed for France. On French territory, the young woman met King Louis XV, who was 60 years old. Then she met her fiancé, Louis Auguste, who had very little contact with women and was certainly a virgin, ended up giving Marie Antoinette only a quick kiss on the cheek. A new wedding ceremony took place in Versailles, a suburb on the outskirts of Paris, where the French court resided. Under the watchful eyes of the nobility, the couple went to bed. Everyone wanted the Dauphin to quickly produce an heir, but that wedding night went down in history forever. Something happened that would be repeated for years. Nothing, as the Dauphin wrote in his diary the next morning. Louis Auguste did not deflower the Dauphin, and the situation remained for 7 long years. Meanwhile, Marie Antoinette was pressured by everyone, but she was not to blame for anything. It is believed that the young Dauphin had phimosis. Therefore, whenever he tried to practice coitus, he felt a lot of pain in his pecker and gave up. Only after a trip to the doctor was he able to perform coitus and produce an heir.